So tell me about your first memories of growing up in China. In the 1950s, you were born about 52, is that right?
Yes, in the 1950s. What noticed most was the fact that it, all this era in the 50s to the mid 60s, it was
Okay, that's good.
so little known what's actually happening uh, to uh, to us. And I was born into the birth, the birth of the or of the People's Republic of China. And so the first thing I remember was singing nursery rhymes that I still remember the song really well. And we were singing to 18-year-old girls, encouraging them to go and get married to replenish the loss of human lives in China at the time when after, well, a protracted nearly 80, 90 years of wars. For example, the Japanese invasion, it wasn't, during the Second War, it wasn't 4 or 5 years, but to the Chinese was over 10, 15 years. And they killed 30 millions of Chinese people. And then straight away following that, it was the Civil War. The Civil War was fought between the communists and the nationalists. At the time, the nationalist was in charge. So as a child, born into it, and that's all I knew. I knew all my nursery rhymes were revolutionary, so to speak.
So you were isolated. How was your sense of the wider world nurtured?
Well, we didn't know anything. Our world, um, to us, was just the family: father, mother, sisters. I have 3 sisters, and and my little friends in the street. And then after a little while, I didn't have any friends because my parents got into trouble, but all because they were educated people, and they were never allocated a job, and then there were years and years of population cleansing. And what that means is, after the revolution, the communists took power, and they worried so much about hidden elements that would come up again and take power from them again. So they basically, like every family, you got to go through that. My parents were very well educated in those days as university graduates, but they never were allowed assigned a job. So they were unemployed with 4 little kids. Um, so it was a tough time. Then once my father was taken out and accused as being counter-revolutionary, then I lost all my friends for a while.
Mm. We often think of our parents, we're about the same age, coming from the heroic generation, enduring 2 world wars, and your parents endured two wars, um, and they leaned in and it seemed that their mission in life was to make life better for us. Is that the story of your parents?
Yes, well, you see, they didn't like a lot of their friends. They said, "Look, you got to leave." When they came in, that'll be the end. But my parents didn't. They were rather idealistic. They wanted to stay back to help rebuild China. At the time, it was all rubble. It's nothing else, nothing. So they didn't leave, but they paid the consequence. The 2 places they could have gone to, it would be Macau, at the time a Portuguese colony, and Hong Kong, a British colony. So they pay a heavy price for that.
Here's your father. He was actually sent to a re-education camp when you were a young boy.
Yes, my father was, and yes, when I was only very young at primary school, when he was sent away to Siberia, and uh, it was it was rather tough because then my mother suddenly found that there were 4 kids, and what was she going to do? And father was away, and so on. So yes, it was very challenging. And then of course, as little children, that we only worry about, oh, I have no friends, they wouldn't play with us anymore. So we draw into the family, and within our house, and then later on within our room, because the house happened to be the ancestral home grandfather built. And well, he had 9 sons, so he built 10 quarters. Idealistically, he thought they would all be living happily together, but it didn't work out. So, so before long, all of a sudden, we witnessed suddenly all these strangers came in, moved in, and 4 or 5 families moved in, and all of a sudden, and they took things from the lounge rooms, the 3 or 4 lounge rooms, and they just took it into their quarters, and that belonged to them. So it was quite a change. If you watch a movie called Dr. Zhivago, and that was exactly what happened. They all moved in because a lot of people had no home, and the district head, and looking after the district, he would call the shots. He would come in and say, right, you had so many empty rooms, there'll be so many families, and you can't say no at all.
And as a young boy, you knew hunger. You knew it well. And many of us, of course, wouldn't have experienced hunger. Is there a permanent legacy?
Well, as you know, even today, 2021, hunger is still a huge issue in the world. And I had what should I say, not opportunity, but I had my experience as a young child growing up, not even puberty time, pre-pubertal time, and that was the most hungry time, and you wanted to eat as much as you could so that you could grow. Yes, it always gave me that empathy and feel, strongly sad to hear people going through hunger. But obviously today I'm not hungry anymore. My wife fits me well.
And going to Hong Kong, you fattened up there.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Interesting you say that. When I make it to Hong Kong, I was now under boat in a secret compartment, and I thought that was the end of me, because I could hear the hammer up the panel behind, and that was a really tough time. And then you're all in the dark next to the little engine room in a little fishing junk, the typical Chinese junk, in the night time, and they tried to smuggle me into Hong Kong. And now, what was we talking about? Now I lost my
being fattened up in Hong Kong.
Oh
Yep.
yes. My grandmother. Fortunately, I had my mother's mother living in Hong Kong at the time, and she was absolutely broken-hearted. And she would say to me, "I'm going to fatten you up." So, as a result, after 6 months, and that was me. And I look at it now, I say, oh my God, I still look so thin. I should have been quite big after 6 months. But that was, yes, that was quite a tough time. But you see, the people living in, like families and friends in Hong Kong and Macau, in the 2 colonies, they were allowed to bring food into China, 10 kilograms of food once a month per person. So my grandmother's job was really trying to take food in to us every month. She would drag 10 kilos of food, yes. Then of course we have to share that with the district head, because he would know any people from outside the area coming in had to report those days, had to report to the district head how many nights you stay. Even as a child, you got to report to them, and he knew that grandmother came home that night. Well, he'd be there that night and come and get his share from us.
Because our parents went through the Great Depression, and did know hunger, and I can remember, the influence of that, of, never leaving anything on your plate.
That's
And
right.
sometimes now, when I go into the pantry at home, a tear will form in my eye because I look at everything on the shelf and I think, gosh, our parents would have killed for that. It was, it's so different, and yet it's not so far away. Um, was there a lethargy that grew from that grew from the hunger and oppression that reduced your sense of hope?
Well, as a child, the very I think the important thing about being a child is that you rely so much on your parents, and because I didn't know what was better than not feeling hungry. I just grew up and say, oh yeah, that's it, and no food, all right, and try to find some food ourselves. And of course, and yes, it did make me. I mean, we felt so lethargic and so tired. We used to go run around with our kites and playing in the fields and so on. And we just sat around and dream about food. And often I'll be up so early. I still get up very early, like about 4 o'clock. I'll be up, and outside our ancestral home, and there was a wall about 5 foot high, and I would get up, climb up there, and I would sit there and dreaming about food and thinking, that'd be nice having this and having that. But that was my breakfast kind of thing, and the breakfast was a glass of a cup of hot water, and then I'll be off to work, off to school. Yeah, so that was really that was really hard to forget. But then, as I was sitting on the wall, and then I could see the light start to emerge from the east, and it glow. The glow gets bigger and brighter, and the other animals, other lizards and other insects and things would all start to wake up, and the world sprang back to life again. And I thought, well, we'll be right again until tomorrow. Yes. So that, in a way, that carries us on,
Yeah.
uh, and not to forget, that we can overcome. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your escape, how you managed to get to Hong Kong, because you were just a teenager, a young teenager at that point, weren't you?
Well, I was 12 years old, and that during the starvation time, if I could brief slightly on that. That was because the second 5-year plan failed dreadfully, and that was called the Great Leap Forward. And the government wanted to rapidly modernize China, and not realizing that China had nothing, no energy, no house, no technology, nothing, no money. And then, of course, it failed because all adults would go and build roads and build dams, and no one would look after the fields, and then followed by around the same time. At the same time, there was this very strict embargoes and sanctions from day one when the republic was born. So there was no trade. The only trading partners would be Hong Kong, not partners, but the route would be going to Hong Kong to gain some foreign money for China. And even at the time, even Russia wasn't friends because they had an argument, apparently. I read all this later on, of course. At the time, I wouldn't know. So that was poor as poor can be. So um, so that suddenly basically overnight, suddenly there was no food. So we went into starvation, and after 3 or 4 years, 10% of the population. I read later on, at the time was about 450 million. So we talk about 45 million people starved to death at the time. So it was quite a horrific time, but we didn't know anything better. We just thought, oh well, no food, okay. Well, we go and try to steal some food from the commune. The commune grew some vegetables and other things, and fish ponds. We are not allowed to fish there anymore, so they kept it for export to Hong Kong to make money. But then at night we'll go out and steal them. As kids, but if we were caught by the guards, and we'll be badly punished. Yeah, but there's a way. There's a way to overcome. Yes.
When you did get to Hong Kong, and of course education you knew was very important, your father had pressed that on you.
Yes.
Miss Moo was your teacher.
Yes,
and she
Miss
said
Moo,
that
yes.
she wasn't that impressed with your early scholarship. She thought you'd been brainwashed. Is that right? You think you had been?
Well, absolutely, because when I think about now today, we call promotion, we call marketing, and advertising. But in my days, it was really every day in every street corner there'll be loudspeakers, and no news, but all these, the parties, propaganda machine would be very, would tell you the same thing over and over, and then you believe it. It's the same here. They tell you Coles is the best supermarket, and we believe it. And yes, so Miss Mill, she was the class mistress as well as English teacher, and she knew straight away that I came from out of town, country boy, and she knew that I couldn't do anything. So remember, older people here would remember perhaps, every week you would have dictation, and you'd be, would be assigned, say, right, there will be 2 pages of this chapter. You're going to be dictated on every Friday afternoons, and then she'll read it out, and then we'll write down. And I kept on scoring 0 because for every one mistake you make is 5% deduction, 5 marks off. So I didn't get any marks for the first term. Then I got really rather depressed, but I thought, there must be a way I'll bugger it. So I memorized the whole page or the whole chapter. And I knew that I wrote too slow. I missed the whole back bit. And then I remember so well that suddenly I got 85%. It worked. And she told me, you cheated. You get up to my desk. You sit up at my desk, and no one can cheat on me. So I sat at her desk, and I continued to do well in my dictation, sometimes even 100%, and then she would stand behind me and watch me and check my arms, hands, as teachers do those days. And so, yes, so that's how I got to like English very much.
Your parents couldn't give you wealth, but what they gave you was a recipe for survival. Your mother would say, "Don't look back." Your father would say, "You're the architect of your future. What if you encounter a problem, do something about it," which clearly, was advice you took. And there's a wonderful story of Andrew wanting better education and seeing a better school in the slums, beyond the slums of Hong Kong, and just going to the school every day and waiting outside the headmaster's office to wear him down so that you could finally get admission to that school.
Well, it is still the very, very prestigious school called La Salle College, and run by the Christian Brothers, or the La Salle Brothers in Hong Kong. And all the boys, even today, they dream of going in. And in my days, same, because competition was getting really intense in Hong Kong to have a good education. My father's gift to me, the important thing, as I left alone in a small bus to the border, get a good education no matter what. And yes, so I remember that really well. And then from Miss Mills' class or that grammar school, then I thought I need to go to that better school. It was so good. But they selected, it is a selective school, and you got to sit for public exams to get in. At primary 6 for year 7, today we call it year 7. And I was already at Form 3 or year 8, and I went there, make an appointment, and wanted to see the headmaster, Brother Casimir, and Brother Casimir didn't want to see me. And then after a little while, he saw me a couple of times and told me, no, there's no vacation. That's not the way we take new boys in. I told you many times, please don't come back. He was never nasty, but he was just really firm. And at the end, he just wouldn't have appointments for me. So I went there, and in my strange uniform, sat outside his office. I just waited, and every day after school, I just would go there and try to see the Brother Casimir. And after about 5 weeks, and suddenly he said, "Come in! What a pain in the neck you are!" so he let me get into that school, and I never looked back, because all of a sudden I realized that my English needed to be even better than at the grammar school. And at La Salle College, it was a big difference. It wasn't an expensive school whatsoever, because it was heavily subsidized by the government, but it was just a standard was so different, and also meeting a lot of foreign teachers, foreign brothers, and then that's the first time I heard about Australia and the kangaroos and the outback and all these fascinating stories. So, yeah.
You came to Australia in 1969. I was struck in reading your book by that comment that you found it easy to feel at home. Why was that?
Well, in 1967, when the Cultural Revolution started, to try to wrest power back from the moderates but the Red Guards were under Chairman Mao to help him get the power back. And Hong Kong was in a mess. So my father said, look, it's not safe for us anymore, and we'll have to go as far as we can, and we have to run, but we really didn't know where to go. And he did say, as far as the South Pole, we will go. So I remember the brothers told me, a brother from Australia told us about football and about all these things. So I thought, well, let's try that. Yes, so that was I find it easy coming here, but then I was really homesick for a whole year. But not until my first term holiday, I was taken to a classmate of mine from Coonabarabran. You know how far Coonabarabran is. And he said, look, come home with us. Come home with me. My mum and dad would say, it's fine, you can come and spend a holiday.
Yeah, so the kindness of strangers.
That was eye-opening.
You just managed to escape the Cultural Revolution. So what did you know about what was going on in the country that you'd left behind, where your mother still was, and some of your
mother
siblings?
Yes, mother took the blame for, well, after I left, father was allowed to leave, so mother took the blame for his leaving, escaping, and the district head was really make it hard for Mum and my two sisters. The other sister early on had left and went to Hong Kong. So, yeah, it was really hard. Yes, I'm sorry, I was still a little bit emotional about Coonabarabran because, you know, I was there and people there were so hospitable.
An epic time in a way. You did your high school certificate in 1970. The Australian Prime Minister, not then the Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, visited China in 1971. The White Australia policy ended in 1972. How much of a difference did that make to your life, those events?
Well, it did help because from 1973, all the tertiary fees were abolished. And because when I got to uni and I worked it out that, I mean, it had been so hard for my father to financially support me. So I wrote to my father and said, don't you worry about me, I'll fix up myself. So I worked all the 6 years at university and part-time and holiday time. And I felt great, I got a job, I paid my rent and no uni fees to pay except the student fees, something like $90 a year or something like that. So it really great help, you know, that Mr. Whitlam came in and abolished the tertiary fees. So I had 3 years of free university education. Very grateful for that.
And I know you showed some initiative and entrepreneurial spirit when Andrew had very little pocket money and he found at school that the teachers were forcing him to have a haircut every whenever, and of course this robbed him of any savings. So you learned hairdressing, didn't you? And you borrowed some money and bought some hair clippers.
Well, yeah. Well, in those days, when you came here to school, you have to go to boarding school. So I ended up at Rye, Holy Cross, and the brother Benedict. I still remember Brother Benedict. He was quite a character, with a little cane, but he didn't hit you or anything. He just tap you on the shoulder as you were having your breakfast. That means that afternoon after school, you got to go and line up, and a barber would be in there and give you a haircut, and they'll charge you 5 bob. And yes, so I thought, oh, you know, every 2 or 3 weeks I have to have a haircut, and that's a lot of money. And so I went out and I bought a set of a haircut gear, and I came back and I offered to the younger boys at school and said, look, you want a haircut? I can do it for you for 5 cents. So they all had really ugly haircuts. But at least they saved 45 cents and they could buy 9 wagon wheels. Remember those days, wagon wheels? 5 cents each. So they could have 9 wagon wheels. So they all line up. So I put my fees up to 10 cents and a bigger boy's 20 cents. And after a little while, instead of every week, the poor barber, he would come every week, and then he only came once a month because he had a bit of competition.
It'd be understandable why you're wanting to escape your past, but you didn't. You stayed very connected to your upbringing and your homeland. Tell me about that. Why you decided to go back? You've been back many times.
Well, in the beginning, my mother was there, and with the 2 sisters still there, and there was a long separation, we tried very hard to get her out, but we couldn't get her out. 19 so so I pay her a visit every now and then, and when we got married, then she was so desperate, actually she was so depressed, then we make a dash back to China in maybe 1980, with our little 18 months old daughter, and just try to cheer her up. And then eventually we got her out. Then I still have a few cousins. So I haven't made many trips back because I have my own family here. This is my home now, and I have 3 children, and so this is my home, and China is where I was born. Yes.
The new China, Australian relations are very poor, and there's a lot of concern at a range of fronts. Do you fear that there's some sort of creeping return of extreme authoritarian rule?
Well, just from what I read, not that I'm much interested in politics, and I spend all my time doing medicine and helping people. When you think about they have opened up, they modernized for the last 40 odd years. It's 2 generations, and the young people today, they're not like what we used to be. My children, when they attended university, they would complain not about them have to share a car, 3 of them, rather they'll complain these rich people coming in and they drive BMs and Merc and going to uni. But they didn't complain that they have to share a car among 3 of them. So they're used to it now. They grew up that way. So I don't know whether they can, if they go back. Just this is only my personal, analysis. If they go back the really top way as it was like my time, and Chinese people used to rebel, and over history there are a lot of rebellions, a lot of now you call them revolutions, and they overcome one dynasty, and then set up another one. They be good for a couple 100 years until they become decay and corrupted, and then someone else will take over. It's been like that for the last 2,000-3,000 years. They would replace the nasty heads. So I doubt if they would. They spend a lot of time trying to lift people out of poverty, which they successfully, they have done that the last 40 years, like 500 million people out of poverty. And they build a lot of infrastructures, and the cousins, we go back for a wedding 3-4 years ago, and they just, they're very happy as they are. Their pension goes up every year, so and very cheap public transportation. They're quite happy the way they are. I don't think,
You're now a coastie, and as a general practitioner, of course, you're an obliged sociologist. So, how do you characterise this place, these people?
In here?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Australians are very hospitable, and they're very tolerant, and they're accepting new ideas and new people from the outside. And I thought you may ask me, have I encountered a lot of racism? Honestly, very little. I don't think it was racism. I thought that time, like for example, I was looking for a job. I thought I'll go into a garage and I might learn how to fix up cars. And the guy looked at me and so little, and he said, "Look, go and lift that truck tire. If you could lift it up, I'll give you the job." Obviously, I couldn't lift it. damn truck tire. But I didn't think it was racism. I just shook my shoulder, and I thought, well, I'm physically I'm not good at that. I'll try something else. Perhaps the really upsetting thing was that last year, as we usually go for a walk down Womble Terrigal area, and my wife and I were walking along, and I had a cap on, and then some young people on the other side on the pickup truck wind the window down and shouted up, "Go home, Chinaman," something like that, and that was upsetting. But yeah, I mean, they were upset because they were upset. They were told that the pandemic was China virus. So it's in the media. Sorry about that. It's media. Any generosity.
But the White Australia policy did cast a long shadow. It was impossible to get your mother out, wasn't it?
It was impossible. Excuse me. In early 1960s, Mr. Holt, the then Prime Minister, he had abolished. He declared that it was dead. White Australian policy is dead. And in 1972, Willem came in and he said, well, definitely dead, no more. Then in 1980, after 2 years of trying to apply for my mother to come, I just established my general practice, and I was able economically finance my mother, so on and so forth. Everything was all right. After 2 years of paperwork, they've failed my mother. They say, no, she failed her English test. And the other thing is, they told me that you have 3 sisters, but you are the only one here. And I said, what about my wife? Oh no, she doesn't count. You, siblings. So that is when I felt that the White Australian policy was still there. Because mother wasn't dumb, and she went through Shanghai Fudan University, and today is one of the number 1 or number 2 in China. But she wasn't given any opportunity by the communists, and she didn't study English, but that wasn't her fault at the time, as you know. And then eventually we got her into, after 2 years, I couldn't get my mother out. As a son in the Chinese culture, you're responsible for your parents. So I rang my sister in Washington, and she straight away said, yes, we open up here too. Parents would be considered as like spouse, is first category, and 6 months later my mother landed in Hawaii. And that was how quick that she got out. So
So you did. Your mother got to the United States.
Yeah, we got mother out, and then that was the only way that mother and father could see each other again.
And she did come to Australia.
Yeah, she did make it to Australia, and she stayed here for 6 months or 12 months, and she would come even after my father passed on. And the last time she came was, I think, 1990 or something, when she was 80 years old. She would make her way through changing planes in Los Angeles or San Francisco, and then here without English. But then she did learn English because she was so determined to become an American citizen. They failed her too because she had to memorize the constitutions in English. And then she eventually passed. So I don't know how she did it, but she passed. I'm pretty sure that she didn't. I'm pretty sure that she must be, when she would go and face the examiner until the examiner got sick of it. like Brother Kashmir got sick of me.
We'll hand over to the other coasties for some questions very shortly. I was moved by the tribute to your wife in the book, your wife Cherise. here, probably hiding up the back. Hello, Cherie. But tell me about Cherie.
She wouldn't allow me to, but I'm going to do it. Yes. Well, I think I always consider myself a terribly lucky person, and the lucky stars seem to be with me. And the biggest impression was the fact that I was really impressed that she was once a national swimmer. Because I am not a good swimmer, so I needed someone that can save me around here in case I drown. But more so though, and she's so tolerant, as I said, hospitable, and her family was so accepting, and they were so delighted, and I just couldn't get fast enough to be in a family again after I haven't had a family for so long. And so the whole family, extended family, they all accepted me, and so I'm very happy, and she's great. But I still owe her a bowl of that oxtail soup. That after my final exam, this is a little tale which I put in my little book. I thought that was important. That I really couldn't afford to take her out to a restaurant to celebrate, so I took her to the hospital canteen, and there was oxtail soup was on for offer, something like $1 or something. So I said, right, let's have that. So I never had that before, and Cherie, I don't think she had it. Hers was typical Australian dinner, but meat and free veggies, and then a friend came along, a junior to me in medical school. He said, Andrew, results are out. I say, don't tell me a lie. It's not out until Monday. That was Friday afternoon. No, it's out. I said, look, you're kidding me. And then he walked away. I said, okay, up to you. Then I look at Cherie and a nice hot soup. I said, I got to go and check it out. So at Prince of Wales Hospital canteen, it's only a very short walk back to the medical school foyer. So I jump up and Cherie follow, and then we rush all the way back there and found out that I passed. So I still owe her that bowl of their soup. We haven't been to a restaurant, but I must take her to a restaurant. Now you can be the witnesses.
All right. Who's got a question for Andrew?
Yes. We hear a lot in the press nowadays about the Uyghurs being held in camps in Western China. And I think some governments and organisations are starting to put a little bit of pressure on the Chinese authorities with regard to that. What do you think it would take to get Chinese authorities to reverse their policy, or would pressure just make them even more intransigent?
Well, it is a very complex question. It's because one, we're here, and we're hearing it from the media, from broadcasts. I don't know what exactly is happening there, so it's very difficult for me to make an assessment. I can make a medical assessment if you ask me, and I'm very happy to do that. But this one is difficult. It is a lot of politics involved, and I often, Chris, I often tell people, medicine is my first love. I mean, except Cherie and the family. But writing is my mistress. And politics is, I don't like to touch it simply because my father, or I watched my father, he wasn't even political, but the politics, the ideology, and these two things, and they really get all these people in the middle. And you and I, we ordinary people and good citizens we all try to be law-abiding, but often we kind of swept off by these politics. I don't know whether I'm right or not because you are more experienced, Chris, on that.
It's Animal Farm, isn't it? It's we really find it difficult ourselves, and we're noticing too that there seems to be a division within the expatriate community too in China. The expatriate, the diaspora here. Are you noticing that people are arguing about New China within the Chinese diaspora?
Yes. Excuse me. Well, from my perspective, that there's a lot of lack of knowledge, just like people don't know what happened to this between 1949 and until the Cultural Revolution, starting about 1967, when there a lot more news would seep out of China. So the blackout time. Part of the reason may be because a lot of people, they perhaps they don't understand what's going on in China today. By that I mean we don't know exactly how happy people are, but we know that they got their passport, they travel, they go in and out, they send millions of students overseas to be educated, and they go home and they get good jobs, and people seem to be happy, but different to the time that when I was a child and everything was so depressing. That we were living in hope, yes. But today they're living in materials. They love their fast cars. We were visiting Canada a few years ago, and my friends there, they were complaining how these rich Chinese kids, at night time, they take their Lamborghinis up the highway and have a car race with each other and caught by the police, and police say, you'll be fined $500, and they pull out the money and say, here you are. So that is a different generation. And now that I haven't answered your question about the differences between the West and China, I really don't know where the answer is, but just judging from the media, how they tit for tat arguing and so on, and making it very difficult. But we, the ordinary people, at the end would be the one who would suffer, I'd say. We need good leaders, we need people with knowledge is what's going on, and then they sit down and diplomatically work it out rather than threatening wars or fights. And I never like wars. There are too many innocent people involved and killed. It's not worth it. But yes, we can be peacefully living together. Just like Australia, there's so many nationalities here, and every time I walk down Terrigal Beach, Womble Beach, and all the different nationalities, and they're all having they're laughing, they're happy, and their kids running around, and what a beautiful world. What a lovely world.
We've got a few more minutes for questions if there are any more.
Andrew, would you mind reading us a passage from the book, please?
Oh, okay. All right. All right, yes. I'll read you this little, just one paragraph. Now, in the Pearl River Delta, Pearl River is the third longest river in China. down south, and the delta is just where Hong Kong is on one side, Macau on the other, and we are just behind. My town is just inland from Macau. And we have a custom there whenever there's something really amazing or happy to the family, and the family would try their best to release something life back to nature. And in our area, there are a lot of rivers, so we usually release a carp, a fish, a live fish back into the water. And say, for example, like someone celebrating 81st birthday or 80th birthday, that's a really long life, and they'll go and release a carp. Or someone's wedding, release a carp. And when I was, the district head must be so moved that one day he decided he would let me go. So when I got home from school that day, my mother straight away took me to the black markets, not the ordinary market. It had to be black market where she'll pay a yuan, 1 yuan, and she bought a little live carp. And so I read here for you. When I got home, I called my mother Mama. Mama immediately took me to the black market and bought a live young carp with her last yuan. We headed to the banks of the Wonder River and released it into the water. The carp lingered in the shallows, confused, disorientated, and not knowing what to do. It flapped its fins and swam in circles on its side. Mama bent over, caressed it, calmed it, just as she did to us when we suffer from hunger pains. Now, go. Far away you must go, she said. Before long, the young carp recovered and swam into the deep of the water to safety. We stayed on to make sure no one would recapture it for food. So this is, to me, it's always a touching part that my mother often would say, don't look back, you got to go. Thank you.
How did your family settle in America? I mean, it must have been so hard. They were apart for so many years, and your mother didn't have any English. Did they accept in America, your parents?
My mother's father, a long story, a little long, but it's all right. I'll make it quick. In 1921, he left my grandmother to look for a better living for the family. So in our area, the Pearl River Delta, a lot of people immigrate, and they jump on tall ships and big ships and steamboats, eventually planes. They'll leave the area to make a better living. And grandfather left in 1921, and he was aiming for the old gold mountain, which is San Francisco to the Chinese. And the trip in a slow boat must be so irritating to him. By the time he got to Hawaii, and I believe that he took one look and said, that's it, I'm staying here, I'm not going anymore. And that was really great because he stayed there forever, and he came home twice or 3 times. And so grandmother and grandfather, they have a long separation time too. So in Hawaii, being Hawaii, there's so many nationalities live together closely, and there's no problem. And eventually, the 2 uncles, they have their families and so on, and so they became American citizens. But during the Japanese invasion, during the Pacific War. No, PRC, the Republic, when under sanction, then all the Chinese, they would have to report to the American government, and have you got family in China still? What's the relationship and so on. Grandfather didn't want any trouble, and he reported my mother and her older sister, they were lost in the Japanese War. So just cut it. So my sister, later on, my grandfather would have to come back to Hong Kong at the age of 60-something, remarry my grandmother, and then took grandmother back to Hawaii. So 21, from 1921 to 63, so that was that long. They lived together. They're not living together. And so my sister, Fanny, my sister immediately older than me, and she, after she worked for a few years, and after I got to after I started medicine 1, she would then decide that she would also seek more education, and she went to Hawaii and stayed with grandparents, and and then eventually she got married, and then eventually they settled down in Washington. So later on, it would be Fanny who then applied for the other sisters. They all went to America. Yes, I have a lot of first cousins second cousins, third cousins now in Hawaii. So thank God, grandfather didn't go further because we all love Hawaii.
I think we've wound up. Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew. Great talking with you, and congratulations on a great book.
Thank you. Thank you.